When we imagine the great empires of the ancient world, our minds often turn to Rome, to the blood-stained arenas, the crucifixions, the roar of conquest. But Persia mastered a quieter, deeper kind of control. The Achaemenid Empire ruled not through spectacle, but through psychology. Its greatest weapon wasn't forged of bronze or iron, it was flesh, lineage, and silence. For within the marble corridors of its palaces, the Persians built something more enduring than empire, a system that devoured dynasties from the inside out. To understand that power, we must step beyond the battlefield and into the heart of its most misunderstood chamber, the royal harem. You stand in a captured palace where victory smells of perfume, not blood. The air hums with the murmurs of servants, their eyes lowered, their movements rehearsed. Outside, soldiers chant in celebration. Inside, the only sound is the soft rustle of silk as the conquered are led deeper into corridors that gleam like liquid gold. The war is over, but for the women behind the curtains, the conquest has only just begun. When Babylon fell in 539 BCE, its gates did not close in defiance. They opened. The city that had outlasted kings for 1,000 years surrendered to Cyrus the Great almost without a fight. The chronicles say he entered as a liberator, not a destroyer. But mercy in Persia was often a mask. Babylon's royal family, the kin of King Nabonidus, was brought to the Persian court. Their temples were restored, their gods honored. Yet their dynasty was erased. Babylon would never again rule itself, for its blood had been absorbed into Persia's veins. The genius of the Achaemenids lay in this subtle alchemy, turning rebellion into lineage, defeat into inheritance. The harem was not merely a place of indulgence, it was an instrument of policy, a living archive of conquered nations. Within its walls, the wives and daughters of vanquished kings became the empire's most precious captives, living treaties, silent hostages, and mothers of Persian princes. Here, power was rewritten in the language of kinship. A Median princess secured her father's loyalty through her silence. A Babylonian queen, once the embodiment of divinity, became the mother of a child who would never speak her tongue. No chains were needed. Marriage itself became the cage. To wed into the Persian court was to vanish into it. Cyrus began the pattern with Cassandane, his Persian queen. His successors perfected it. Cambyses took an Egyptian princess after subduing her land, a gesture of dominion disguised as union. Yet these women, adorned in gold and ceremony, understood the truth. Their children might inherit Persian thrones, but their own names dissolved from history. Their faces uncarved, their words unrecorded. In Persepolis, the stones whisper what the scrolls conceal. On the reliefs, endless processions of tribute-bearers, Lydians, Elamites, Indians, Greeks, approach the throne in eternal obedience. But the women are absent. Their omission is deliberate. To erase a queen's image was to erase her people's memory. The Persians knew that absence could be the most enduring form of conquest. Life inside the royal palace was rule and ritual. Each movement catalogued, each word observed. Eunuchs, trusted and watchful, patrolled the corridors of marble and gold. Their duty was not only to protect the king's privacy, but to ensure the silence of his women. Through these invisible custodians, the empire maintained its architecture of obedience. When a captured princess entered the harem, she was dressed as a bride, not a prisoner. The air smelled of myrrh and cedar. Bracelets inscribed with cuneiform blessings were clasped on her wrists, a ceremony of belonging that masked dispossession. She was told she was honored, chosen by the king himself. But she would never again see her homeland. Herodotus, writing with both fascination and fear, claimed that the Persian kings loved women as they loved empires, to possess, not to cherish. Yet he misunderstood. This was not lust. It was assimilation. Every royal marriage diluted a bloodline, rewriting the map of loyalty one womb at a time. Rebellion became impossible when the heirs of the conquered were now heirs to the conqueror. Archaeology reveals what history forgot. In a Persepolitan tablet, a clerk recorded 10 measures of barley for the lady from Babylon, now of the king's house. No name, only origin and obedience. Another mentions the mother of the Prince of Egypt, her title surviving while her identity vanishes. Each entry is a tombstone carved in ink, the empire's ledger of erasure. Yet, even in this gilded captivity, influence endured. The king's mother, the matriarch of the harem, often ruled the unseen empire. Through her, ministers rose or fell, rebellions died before they began. Within the silken quiet, alliances were forged in whispers. Power in the Persian court moved like perfume, invisible, intoxicating, lethal. Still, for every woman who wielded subtle strength, dozens more were reduced to silence. When Darius carved his triumphs into the cliffs of Behistun, 25 rebel kings appear bound before him, their names etched for eternity. The queens who bore their heirs are nowhere. Their punishment was invisibility. Their legacy lived only in the sons who spoke Persian, not the language of their mothers. At the center of Persepolis stood the Apadana, the great audience hall. Envoys from 20 nations came bearing tribute, gold, ivory, lapis, silks. They bowed before the King of Kings, the light of the world. The polished floor reflected their submission. But beyond those glittering chambers in the veiled quarters of the palace, a quieter ceremony unfolded. Laughter echoed through the lattice. Light, hollow, rehearsed. The Persians understood a truth that later empires only imitated. To destroy an enemy was conquest. To erase their memory was eternity. When Alexander's soldiers burned Persepolis, the smoke revealed frescoes hidden for centuries. Faint outlines of women painted over, ghosts of dynasties consumed by empire. And when the last flame died, the wind moved through what had once been the harem's gate, carrying the faint echo of anklets, the sigh of silk, and the whisper that built an empire. What is left of a dynasty when even its women forget their names? The night in Susa glowed like molten bronze. Oil lamps burned along the palace corridors, their flames trembling against the polished stone. Music floated from the banquet hall, lyres, flutes, and the soft clash of golden cups. But beneath the music pulsed something colder, sharper. It was the sound of envy, coiling beneath the silks of the queen. Amestris, wife of Xerxes, queen of queens, sat among the perfumed courtiers. Around her, the walls shimmered with painted scenes of conquest, Persian archers, captured kings, gods watching from the clouds. But at the far end of the room sat another woman, younger, laughing softly. Her name has been lost, but the Greeks tell us she was the wife of Xerxes's brother, a noblewoman of radiant beauty. The king's eyes lingered too long, and in that moment, power turned poisonous. By morning, the banquet's music was gone. What followed would stain the air of Susa for generations. According to Herodotus, Amestris demanded the woman be handed to her. When the courtiers hesitated, she said only, "The king may have her love, but I will have her silence." What came next was an act of cruelty so deliberate it transcended vengeance. It became theater. Her nose, ears, lips, and breasts were cut away, and her body sent back to her husband, mutilated beyond recognition. It is a story historians have wrestled with for centuries. Was it fact, exaggeration, or Greek invention meant to vilify Persia's royal women? Yet even if embroidered, the tale reveals something deeper about the empire's relationship with power, beauty, and control. To mutilate a noblewoman was to mutilate an entire family's honor. It was not simply a personal revenge. It was a message carved into flesh. The Achaemenid Persians ruled through symbols. Their justice, their punishments, even their architecture were designed to communicate hierarchy. The king's mercy was public, but so was his wrath. In such a world, beauty was political currency. and the women of the royal court embodied the state's legitimacy as surely as the armies did. A queen's jewels were not ornaments, they were declarations. Her composure, her perfection, reflected the divine order that justified empire. To deface that perfection was to collapse that order into chaos. In the Persian mind, the body was a vessel of meaning. Mutilation was never random. It was ritual. When rebels were impaled, when traitors' ears or tongues were cut away, it symbolized the silencing of defiance. The same principle applied within the palace. The destruction of a woman's face or form was the destruction of her lineage, her right to be remembered. Even the silence that followed such punishments was deliberate. In the royal annals, there is no mention of a mistress's act, no whisper of the mutilated noblewoman. The empire's records glide past the scandal as though it never occurred. But silence, too, is a form of inscription. The absence of her name becomes its own kind of monument, a void that speaks of power maintained through fear. Ctesias, another Greek chronicler who once served at the Persian court, described a mistress as terrible in jealousy and boundless in authority. Yet he also noted that she ruled the harem with unmatched discipline, overseeing its rituals, its hierarchy, and its politics. The harem was no idle sanctuary of luxury. It was a state within a state. Behind its curtains, alliances were formed, spies exchanged secrets, and the destinies of provinces were decided in whispers. The mutilation in Susa, then, was not a crime of passion. It was a warning. In a palace where hundreds of women were bound by silence, a single act of public violence restored the queen's dominance. Servants would remember the smell of blood on the marble, the metallic tang of it mingling with myrrh. They would lower their eyes when a mistress passed, for she had proven herself not merely the king's consort, but the empire's enforcer of order. Outside Persia, the story spread like wildfire. To the Greeks, it confirmed every suspicion they held about Eastern despotism, that behind the splendor of the court lay unspeakable cruelty. Yet within Persia, such acts, if they occurred, were cloaked in ritual justification. Punishment was purification. A woman who had tempted a king's gaze was seen as a disruption of cosmic harmony. To destroy her beauty was to restore that balance. In this way, gender and power were entangled in a brutal dance. The same society that revered queens as protectors of dynastic bloodlines could also turn their bodies into weapons of state terror. The royal woman was both sacred and expendable, her status dependent on her proximity to the king's favor. Even the queen herself was never beyond danger. The harem that served as her throne could become her prison overnight. One tablet unearthed near Susa bears a strange record. Rations withheld from the house of the queen by decree of the great king. No reason given, no date. Perhaps it marks a punishment, perhaps a rebellion within the women's quarters. Yet it captures the fragility of royal life, the way status could shift with a whisper, and a woman once adorned in gold could vanish into silence. Through stories like Amestris's, historians glimpse a truth larger than the tale itself, that in Persia's empire of images, pain was performance. To humiliate a rival in private was meaningless. To do so in ritual form, before witnesses, gave it weight. The mutilated noblewoman became a warning written not in ink or stone, but in the memory of every servant who dared look up. Still, there are hints of remorse buried in the ruins of Susa. Later inscriptions commissioned by Xerxes speak obsessively of order, truth, and purity, as if to erase the shadows cast by his own household. One fragment praises the queen who keeps the women in peace, a line that reads less like honor and more like apology. When night fell again over Susa, the music returned. New songs, new laughter. But beneath the gold and incense, the marble remembered. Perhaps that is the cruelest legacy of all, that for the women of the Persian court, survival meant becoming part of the architecture, immortal yet voiceless. Centuries later, when archaeologists unearthed the city, They found fragments of bracelets, mirror shards, and a single ivory comb, delicate, scorched, and carved with the faint outline of a woman's face. The features were eroded, as if scraped away by time or by human hands. No name, no inscription. Only the echo of the queen's punishment, an empire's reflection staring back without a mouth to speak. At dawn, the cliffs of Behistun burn gold. The mountain rises like a petrified wave, and halfway up its sheer face a king stands forever above his enemies. Below him, 9 captive rulers kneel, their faces turned in eternal humiliation. Above them floats Ahura Mazda, god of truth, watching over the order Darius the Great claimed to restore. The wind here speaks in 3 tongues, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, a chorus carved 25 centuries ago to make rebellion impossible, even in memory. When Darius commissioned the Behistun inscription around 520 BCE, he was not recording history, he was rewriting it. His throne was seized through a coup, and to rule he needed not armies, but narrative. Every line of the inscription is propaganda. Each defeated king a liar, each rebellion a lie crushed by truth. It was the world's first press release, carved in stone, designed to dominate minds as much as lands. Yet Darius's greatest manipulation lay not in what he wrote, but in what he erased. For every rebel king named, there were wives and daughters left unspoken, erased as if they had never breathed. The men's defeat was public. The women's disappearance was private, silent, complete. Their beauty, once a symbol of power, became a weapon of assimilation. Absorbed into Persian households, they dissolved their nations from within. In the archives of Persepolis, clay tablets list rations for the daughter of the Lydian, the mother of the Median prince, the woman of Babylon, now of the king's house. Line after line, origin noted, identity erased. The Persians understood that cities could be rebuilt, but genealogies could not. When Darius stood upon the ledge, wind tearing at his robe, he was not asserting victory, he was sculpting memory. The inscription opens with his own voice. I am Darius, the great king, king of kings. What follows is theology as propaganda, power sanctified as truth. The God he invoked was less divine than ideological, memory itself. What happens when an empire learns to control remembrance? Persia's brilliance lay in its psychological warfare. Rebellions were crushed not only with spears but with ritual humiliation. Captured kings were stripped, paraded, and forced to kneel before Persian symbols. Their likenesses were carved into stone, uniform, diminished, their names replaced. Defiance became error, submission, history. Even within the palace, the same philosophy ruled. The royal harem, Persia's hidden machine of empire, was a living archive of conquest. Each woman within its walls embodied a fallen city, a vanished throne. As generations passed, their origins blurred. Their children grew speaking Persian, worshipping Ahura Mazda, loyal to a king who was both father and captor. History became bloodline, and bloodline became control. To the Greeks, this was tyranny. To the Persians, order. Herodotus claimed they taught their sons to ride, to shoot, and to speak the truth. But truth in Persia was imperial. Darius declared rebellion a lie because he understood that whoever defines truth commands eternity. The word truth itself became a weapon, carved into stone to make forgetting divine. The rebels at Behistun are not individuals but echoes, beards, crowns, and postures repeating like patterns. Across Persepolis, similar reliefs show processions of tribute-bearers, distinct yet identical, unified in obedience. Diversity existed only to prove submission. The empire's conquest extended beyond borders because it colonized imagination. In Egypt, Persian pharaohs kept ancient rituals. In Babylon, the New Year festival survived, but the name of its chosen king was replaced by Darius's. Cultures remained intact, emptied of their original soul. Persia did not destroy, it absorbed. The women taken from these lands became living metaphors of this absorption. They were celebrated, yet silenced, ornaments of gratitude without memory. Their stillness mirrored the state's ideal subject: obedient, unremembered, absorbed. When Alexander the Great reached Behistun 2 centuries later, he could not read its words. The languages had already died, but the message endured. Its grammar of submission, the belief that rebellion was moral failure, outlived the empire itself. Rome, Britain, every ruler who rewrote history echoed that mountain's command: rewrite, reframe, replace. Today, the cliff still stands. The carved kings remain, their limbs cracked by wind, their god untouched. From below, they seem small, almost human. Yet the silence between the lines feels immense, filled with queens erased, children forgotten, nations dissolved. In that silence lies Persia's most enduring conquest. The empire ruled not by sword or law, but by shaping what people remembered. To defeat an enemy was victory. To erase their story was eternity. As the sun sets over Behistun, shadows stretch across the carvings, turning kings into silhouettes. The voices of 3 dead languages fade into wind, and in that wind, the empire still whispers its final command: